I'm Regina Anderson. Centrus. And I built my career in classified defense work. Mostly behind the scenes. Never flashy. But deeply respected by those who knew. For years. I supported my family quietly. Covering bills. Editing, school papers. Helping, without ever being asked twice. Hold that picture. I'm Gina Carter. And this is the part they never saw. Before we walk into the room where one word flips everything. Tell me where you're listening from and the time on your clock. Who here has done the work? Nobody sees the room smelled like polished brass and buffet steam. Flags draped every wall. Metals glinted under yellow light. And someone had arranged the tables by rank without saying a word. That's how it always worked in my family, order first. Empathy somewhere near last. Mom stood at the mic. Her voice perfectly polite. Every syllable dressed for company. You're embarrassing this family, she said, smiling as if it were a joke. The crowd laughed softly, unsure what to do with the sting hiding inside her tone. My brother Tyler leaned back in his chair, tapping the edge of his beer bottle. Deadbeat, he muttered. Just loud enough for nearby ears. The laughter stopped. Plates shifted. It felt like the air itself was waiting to see if I'd react. I didn't. I kept my fork still. Kept my breathing quiet. The Veterans Club was a cathedral to image shadow boxes lined the walls. Every surface shining with someone's achievement. My chair, on the other hand, sat half a step from the busing station. I could hear trays clatter behind me. Someone had made sure I wasn't quite part of the photo. Mom's eyes swept over the table like a searchlight, landing on me only long enough to prove I hadn't vanished. We all know how hard it is to stay disciplined, she continued. Her hand rested on Tyler's shoulder. Not mine. The sound of air vents filled the silence. Steady. Clinical. My water glass trembled slightly from the vibration. That's when I noticed the coaster under it laminated, with a slogan printed in navy blue: honor, courage, commitment. 3 words I'd spent a career living by in secret. Words my family had turned into decor. I thought about saying something clever. Maybe something that would make them flinch. But instead, I studied the pattern of condensation on the glass. I stored the moment like data. Every insult, every glance away recorded. Lauren, my sister, stared down at her plate. She didn't laugh. But she didn't speak either. That was her brand of loyalty, quiet, complicity. Aunt Marlene, sitting near the end, shifted uncomfortably, as if she could already sense the temperature about to change. I looked at my family and realized I wasn't angry. Not yet. What I felt was precision. The same focus I use when a network alarm pings at 2 a.m. That slow, cold assessment, before you decide which cable to cut. They saw a deadbeat in a borrowed chair. I saw a hierarchy built on shiny surfaces. I'd spent years keeping their systems from crashing. And none of them even knew it. So I let Mom's smile hang in the air. I let Tyler's smirk sit there, small and satisfied. And I told myself what I always tell my team before a shutdown. Document everything. Don't react. Just prepare the fix. The fork in my hand caught a glint from the overhead light. I set it down gently, the metal barely whispering against porcelain. If they wanted a scene, they'd have to write it without me. The HVAC hummed again. Low and constant. Somewhere behind me, a server cleared a tray. My reflection flickered in the glass of a shadow box on the wall, blurred, half hidden by a metal's glare. I didn't mind. I'd been invisible for years. But invisibility, when chosen, is power. He sat still, the picture of compliance, and thought, keep talking. Mom, keep laughing. Tyler, every system built on arrogance eventually hits overload. And when it does, it's the quiet ones who know where the switches are. I slipped out before dessert. No scene. No storming off. Just the sound of my heels on tile and the faint hum of air conditioning following me into the hallway. The lights were cold and sterile, perfect for what I needed to do. I took out my phone. My hands didn't shake. They never do when it's time to fix a broken system. First, Mom's hospital, autopay, $12,000. Cancelled. Tyler's temporary loan, $3,500. Still unpaid. Deleted from reminders. The $5,000 retainer that bailed him out of his DUI archived. I let the screen go dark for a moment. The faint reflection of my face hovering above the glass. They'd always mistaken my quiet for weakness. But this wasn't weakness. This was maintenance. Love doesn't mean unlimited access. I whispered, typing the words into a note before pinning it to the top of my phone. One rule. My new firewall. Then I opened the family group chat. It was full of static memes. Chain prayers. Black photos. I scrolled to the top and hit mute. 90 days. Silence restored. I leaned against the wall, staring at the spiderweb crack running across my screen. It caught the fluorescent light. Thin and silver. Like an old scar. Years of answering every ping had done, that one tiny impact at a time. People like to call you strong when you survive, neglect. But strength is just a reflex. You adapt. You build patterns. You learn to scan for danger and call it loyalty. It's not heroism, it's conditioning. When I was 12, I learned to make myself useful. When you're useful, they don't throw you away. That's the invisible chain no one sees. It looks like devotion, but it's a survival protocol. I thought about every night they'd called me in a panic. Mom's voice trembling over an insurance bill. Tyler slurring my name from a police station. Lauren crying because her husband deployed, and she couldn't finish a paper. Every time, I'd answered before the second ring. Because silence felt like cruelty. Because I thought love meant showing up first. But silence isn't cruelty. Sometimes it's the only language respect understands. I walked out of the corridor and into the cool night air. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Tyler Yu. Still mad. Lol lighten up. I didn't even open it. I just turned the screen over and watched the blue glow fade. For the first time in years, my mind went quiet. No background alarm. No expectation to rescue anyone. Just stillness. And in that silence, I could finally hear myself think. All those years, I thought I was the helper. The glue. The responsible one. But what I really was the patch. The quick fix that kept their system running while mine corroded underneath. Not anymore. I took one last look at the dark screen. Felt the chill of the metal against my fingers. And smiled. This was my first clean cut. Cold. Necessary. Controlled. The system would keep running without me for a while. But when the next crisis hit, and it always did, they'd finally see what really held it together. And I'd be gone. I started keeping a mental list of every time I'd held the family together without applause. The tuition edits. The emergency flights. The quiet money transfers, I told myself were no big deal. They'd all been proof of love. I thought, but love built on obligation isn't love. It's labor. There were nights when I'd sit at my desk after another impossible week at work and still open Lauren's thesis files, track changes glowing like a confession no one would read. There were Saturdays I'd spend wiring payments I could barely afford while Mom bragged about Tyler's discipline. He got medals. I got receipts. One night, I dug through a drawer and found a small metal clip holding a stack of notes from my colleagues. Anonymous thank yous. Couldn't have done it without you. Your fix saved the project. All unsigned. All tucked away like my entire career. When I looked at them, I realized I had proof of worth. It just wasn't framed on a mantle. A week later, I stopped by my parents' house. The living room gleamed like a museum of other people's validation plaques. Ribbons. Framed degrees. The smell of furniture polish hiding something sour underneath. I set down a hardcover naval history book I'd tracked down for Dad, a signed edition. Something he used to quote from. He didn't look up from his conversation with Tyler. Mom nodded vaguely. By the time I left, the book was buried under a pile of unopened mail. It wasn't rage. I felt walking out the door. It was clarity. They weren't cruel because they didn't know better. They were cruel because they needed the story of my failure to make their own shine brighter. For years, I thought if I worked harder, I could buy my way back into their respect. Pay another bill. Solve another crisis. Stay quiet and hope they'd notice someday. But standing there in that living room of trophies, it hit me. If you can't salute it, they won't see it. The next morning, I looked around my own apartment. No medals. No plaques, just sticky notes. Monitors. And the steady hum of servers through the wall. It wasn't pretty. But it was mine. And for the first time, that was enough. The messages started pouring in before sunrise. Tyler first, always first when he wanted an audience. A photo of him in tactical gear. Green sharp. Captioned, some of us serve. Then Mom's text. We need to talk about your attitude. Lauren chimed in. You're overreacting. You always take things too personally. And finally, the public post. Mom's favorite stage. A blurry family photo with the caption, "Some people forget who raised them." The comment section bloomed with sympathy from her friends. Pity emojis. Stay strong. Jen. I know how ungrateful kids can be. Every line felt like a brick in a wall they were building to keep themselves from seeing what they'd done. I scrolled once. Twice. Then set my phone face down. No reply. They didn't deserve one. Because that's what they wanted. Engagement. A reaction. Proof I still cared enough to play the part. The next time I saw them, the table looked the same. Same medals. Same shadows. Same yolks. Only now, I wasn't participating. I sat there. Hands folded. And flicked the honor. Courage. Commitment. Coaster with my fingertip. It wobbled, but didn't fall like the illusion it was. All slogan. Nah. Substance. The words were supposed to mean integrity. Bravery. Devotion. But around here, they meant hierarchy. Compliance. Image. I realized I'd been the invisible brace holding that illusion together. Every favor I granted, every silence I swallowed, was another screw tightening the structure that erased me. Without me, the shelf would still stand, but a little less steady. Mom looked across the table and smiled, like nothing had happened. Lauren laughed too loud at something Tyler said, her voice trembling at the edges. I watched them all perform together, the show of unity, of tradition, of earned respect, and wondered if any of them ever noticed how much of that performance I used to write. The hallway smelled like boiled ham and borrowed pride. It always did. The air was thick with it, warm. Heavy. Familiar. But this time, it didn't stick to me. It slid right off. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't make a declaration. I just stood. Smoothed the crease in my jacket. And left the coaster wobbling on the table behind me. Let it balance there on its hollow words. Let it spin until it settled. Because that's all they ever gave me, spin. And I was done stabilizing it. When I got home, I made tea. Opened my window. And listened to the city hum. No medals. No posts. No noisy. Just the sound of my own life. Finally running on its own operating system. That night, I stopped thinking in feelings and started thinking in code. If my family wanted rules, fine. I'd give them structure. I built boundaries, the way I'd build a firewall layered. Precise. Impenetrable. Step 1, define access. No one gets emergency privileges without credentials. Step 2, audit trail. Every favor. Every. Can you just logged and timestamped in my head. Step 3, offboarding. Cut legacy permissions that never should have existed in the first place. It sounds clinical. But clarity often does. I wasn't trying to punish them. I was protecting uptime mine. I went through my accounts. No more shared cards. No more quick transfers labeled, just helping out. The money I used to drain to keep them comfortable now flowed into something that mattered, my future. I blocked the emergency texts that always came after midnight. Can you talk? Need a favor? Those messages used to make my pulse spike, the way an alarm does when a system's compromised. Now, they just went nowhere. Friday afternoons, I started doing something new. An open mentorship hour for junior analysts. People who actually wanted to learn. People who respected boundaries. I gave them my full attention for 60 minutes. Then logged off guilt-free. Somewhere in those weeks, the noise around me began to fade. Mom's guilt trips. Tuller's dikes. Lauren's carefully worded. I'm just trying to help. All background static now. When the silence settled, I realized how much of my identity had been built around crisis response. The fixer. The translator. The invisible network that caught every failure before anyone else noticed. I thought of my dad's favorite phrase, borrowed status. That's what my family ran on. Borrowed authority. Borrowed respect. Borrowed pride. Loud. Glossy. And shallow. But real competence. It doesn't need applause. It doesn't even need witnesses. It just runs clean. Efficient. Constant. So I built my life that way. A system that didn't crash every time someone else panicked. And maybe that's why. When the next door opened, the one I didn't expect, I was ready. It happened at another family event. Same venue, Sam decor. Same hierarchy, humming quietly in the background. Only this time, I wasn't there to prove anything. I was there to observe. The door at the back of the room slid open. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't brace for impact. I knew exactly who I was now. And this time, the system wasn't going to write me out of the story. The air shifted before I even turned my head. That instinct, the one trained to sense a room's change in temperature, kicked in like muscle memory. The door glided open. A faint scuff of polished shoes against marble. Then the voice, calm. Steady. Measured. Lieutenant Commander Brooks. Reporting as ordered. He stepped inside in full dress whites. Ribbons neat across his chest. Every thread in its place. The chatter dipped. Forks paused midair. He scanned the room once, as if assessing a threat. Then his eyes found me. He stopped. 2 beats of silence stretched thin across the room. Then he straightened. And saluted. Ma'am. The sound hit harder than any insult ever had. One word, clean. Professional. Final. A fork clattered against a plate, somewhere near Dad. Aunt Marlene gasped. Lauren's face drained of color. Nobody moved. The salute wasn't casual. It wasn't out of pity or family obligation. It was formal. Deliberate textbook. And it was directed at me. I nodded back once. Automatic. The way training does when instinct outruns thought. Lieutenant Commander. I said quietly. For the first time in my life. They looked at me and couldn't make sense of what they were seeing. Dad's jaw flexed. Mom's smile froze, mid-polish. Tyler's eyes darted, like he was recalculating the math of the room. I could feel it, the shift. The hierarchy rewiring itself in real time. Years of silent dismissal collapsing under a single gesture from within their own value system. And in that silence, a ledger opened in my head. $12,000, Mom's hospital bill. $3,500, Tyler's loan. $5,000 for his DUI lawyer. Or's editing Lauren's papers until dawn. All the quiet rescues. The uncredited labor. The sleepless nights. Every debt. Every unthanked moment lined up neatly, like code. And one truth flashed across the console: I'd been financing my own dismissal. The room held its breath. He lowered his hand, slowly. Expression, unreadable. We both knew what the salute meant. It wasn't about bloodlines or dinner politics. It was recognition. One professional to another. One operator to the invisible force behind his safety. He took the empty seat beside me without asking permission. No one stopped him. Mom's fork scraped her plate. Dad looked down at his hands. Lauren's lips parted. No sound. Tyler blinked too often. No one knew what to say. And that silence, after all the years they'd filled with noise, was worth everything. I didn't gloat. Didn't need to. For the first time, I wasn't waiting to be seen. I was seen, and the room, once so loud with its medals and slogans, finally learned the language of quiet respect. The word lingered long after his salute dropped, ma'am, as if it had its own frequency. You could almost hear the room recalibrate. All that borrowed pride. All that noise. Shrinking into the hum of the ventilation. Tyler tried to recover first, muttering something about overdoing the formalities. But his voice cracked halfway through. Mom cleared her throat. Dad stared at his plate. Fork motionless. Lauren just looked lost. Like she was watching a familiar play, suddenly rewritten mid-scene. And in that suspended quiet, something inside me settled. Not triumph, clarity. For years, they treated my calm like absence. My silence, like surrender. Now, the silence belonged to me. That's when the math started running in my head again. All the transactions, all the unacknowledged labor that kept their world spinning. 12,000 for Mom's procedure. 3.5 for Tyler's temporary loan. 5 for his DUI lawyer. The flights. The edits. The favors. So many little withdrawals from my peace. Every time I paid. I thought I was buying love. I wasn't. I was underwriting my own invisibility. The phrase hit hard enough to sting. I've been financing my own dismissal. Evan didn't say anything more. He didn't have to. He'd already done what no one else in that room ever could. He mirrored back my worth in a language they couldn't dismiss. I felt the tension slide out of my shoulders. Slow. Deliberate. Like a system powering down after years of running hot. No tears. No shaking hands. Just a clean, Internal click. I looked around the table once more. The family who built a religion out of appearance and realized I didn't owe them another word. Recognition from within their own structure had already rewritten the hierarchy. I reached for my water glass. The coaster beneath it, honor, courage, commitment, was damp from condensation. The ink had started to blur. For the first time, I noticed how fragile those printed words really were. When dessert was served, I stood. No announcement. No excuse. Just the sound of my chair scraping lightly against the tile. I nodded once toward Evan. He returned the gesture. A silent acknowledgement between two people who understood things that didn't need explaining. Then I walked out. The murmur of confused whispers fading behind me, and felt the night air hit like truth. Cold. Clean. Finally mine. The echo of that single word followed me for days. Ma'am. It wasn't grand. It wasn't sentimental. It was recognition. Stripped of decoration. Every time it replayed in my head, I felt the structure of my past life loosen another bolt. Tyler stopped joking in the group chat after that night. Lauren went quiet too. Her texts hesitant, like she was typing on eggshells. Mom tried twice first, with a voicemail about how things got tense. Then with a long message about family sticking together. I didn't reply. Dad didn't call at all, which was its own kind of confession. But the silence didn't sting anymore. It was information. I'd spent years mistaking quiet for peace, when really, it had been suppression. Now the silence was clean. It wasn't absence. It was room to think. That's when I realized why the salute had changed everything. My family's respect had always been built on shiny symbols, badges, uniforms, plaque, borrowed authority. It never came from understanding. But when someone inside that system saw me, the illusion cracked. Their entire value economy depended on others, validating what they worshipped. When their own language rank spoke on my behalf, the lie collapsed. That's the power illusion of the shiny badge. It tricks people into thinking the metal holds the meaning, not the person wearing it. My parents lived by that illusion. I built systems that kept those illusions from falling apart. Weeks later, I was invited to a closed-door panel in D.C. Just initials on name cards. No cameras. No press. I was mid-sentence when I saw them, standing quietly at the back of the room. My parents. They didn't wave or interrupt. They just listened. When the panel ended, they waited until the hallway cleared. Dad stepped forward. Voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. You looked like you belonged up there. I nodded. I did. He paused. We didn't know. I met his eyes. That was the problem. No hug. No tears. Just a temperature shift. A quiet acknowledgement that the story they'd written about me no longer fit. Back home, my office looked exactly the way I liked it. No windows. No audience. Just the hum of servers. The soft blue glow of code running right on my desk sat a photo of the coastline from a trip I'd taken alone. Beside it, my phone buzzed a text from Lauren. I'm sorry for believing what was easier to believe. For laughing when I should have asked. For not seeing what you were carrying. No emojis. No excuses. Just truth. I read it twice. Then typed one line back. Thank you for finally looking. That night, I opened my calendar. Friday mentorship hour. I smiled. It was full again. I didn't need reunion dinners or redemption arcs. What I had was better peace designed. Not given. Before bed, I walked past the old family mantle. The same medals and plaques still shined in the photo I'd taken years ago. But in my memory, the light on them was dimmer now. The coaster that once read honor, courage, commitment, was there too? The ink smudged. Letters, ghosting into one another. I thought about wiping it clean. Then didn't. Some illusion deserved to fade. I turned off the light. And the room quiet. Steady. Stayed Mina. Because silence isn't grace. It's permission, until it isn't. When someone finally saw my worth, I didn't stay for their comfort. I left for my peace. So now I'll ask you when that moment came for you.